Attention, all curious minds, innovators, and trendsetters. It's time to pause, lean in, and get ready for an extraordinary journey as we dive deep into the fascinating realms of life, technology, entertainment, and business. Let's explore, learn, and grow together. Brace yourselves, for the next thrilling episodes of Hipther Talks is about to take off. Counting down from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here we go.
Hi everyone, Zoltan here. We're back again this week with Hipther Talks, and I am welcoming you to not just another episode of our special talks. We will dive into the conversation that the industry should be having. I mean, the iGaming industry especially. But they don't do it actually. So last week I had a call with Jessica, who I'm going to introduce a bit now in a couple of minutes, about how this is very important to talk about accessibility, and it's not just a nice thing to have, but it's now also a legal, operational, and it's an ethical must as well. So. Thank you for joining us, and because we have two heavy hitters in this field. Like I said, Jessica Maier, a co-founder at EGARA, and Rene Perkins, founder and CEO at CityMaaS. So they are making the digital world more inclusive, one click at a time. So just get ready for this awesome episode, and thank you for joining us again, because ESG is no longer just a buzzword, guys. So it's here. So yeah, as we have our tradition here on Hipther Talks, we like to give the opportunity for our guests to say a few words about themselves in their own words. So who should start? Rene, you go first.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. Like to introduce my company, CityMaaS. It's got a mission to make the world accessible online for everybody, particularly for disabled communities and the aging population. And I think it's a big topic in terms of accessibility, particularly digital accessibility, because everything is online, whether it's online gaming or online shopping, e-commerce. It's very important to say no to the 15% to 15 to 20% of disabled community. So I'm here to talk to you more about that.
All right, Jessica.
Yeah, thrilled to be here too. I'm Jessica Maier from EGARA, as Zoltan said, and our home is the gambling industry, and we've been working in that industry for decades now, looking at all the regulatory implications, compliance, and everything that comes with it. And this really hit us by surprise as well. But we're all the more happy to be speaking with the right stakeholders now, and having partnered with CityMaaS to actually find solutions to what is, could be a huge problem, but is also one that can be tackled and then not turn into such a huge problem. So actually talking about how to do that is great that we're getting the opportunity today, Zoltan. So thank you very much again.
With pleasure. We also were happy to see your partnership, and we, of course, covered it in our news lines. So let's start with you, Jessica, because for those that are unfamiliar with the European Accessibility Act, can you briefly explain what it requires and how it applies to gambling operators specifically? Because I know that you are from that field.
Yes, exactly. So the European Accessibility Act is a directive. And it's a directive that was adopted by the EU already in 2019. And its objective is that it seeks to ensure that the key products and services are accessible to people with disabilities across the whole internal market, so all of the EU. So basically, it's a harmonization tool. Something we're not used to, obviously, in the gaming space, where we don't have the harmonization, where every jurisdiction has its own local regulations. But this is a harmonized framework, meaning that the directive also needs to be implemented by each of the member states. And that implementation deadline is now approaching. That's end of this year, June. So we're very close to that. And then it is technically the national laws that apply and govern all the details. But the main pillars have already been known since 2019. And they will be what will be shaping what the expectations are. around what needs to be done to ensure this accessibility. And what the Act does is define different industries and different sectors, specifically to say this is where accessibility has to happen. And like I would say the easiest way to put it, what accessibility means would be compliance with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which are international guidelines on how to make text, images, etc. that we see on websites understandable and accessible for people who can't see text or pictures, or have other impairments that stop them from using the website as somebody without such impairments could. So it works with these guidelines that set a baseline for how that can be done. And the gambling sector specifically isn't directly mentioned in the European Accessibility Act as a sector, but the e-commerce sector is. And now the gambling industry for decades has claimed and wanted to be part of the e-commerce community, and also, of course, there are similarities to other parts of the e-commerce sector, like a shop or online shop, etc., where you have some of the accounts feature, you have to register somewhere, you have payments going to and from, you have terms and conditions. All of these things need to be clear and made available in a way that is understandable in just the same way as if, to disabled people as it would be to people without a disability. So that's really what this directive and the national laws that then implemented give us as a task to find sort of this compliance and make these websites accessible based on those standards from June onwards.
Yeah.
And yes, and it's been a bit quiet.
Yeah, it has been, and it's very interesting because we cover many industries, and about 65% of our content is about the gambling sector. And up until I received the press release about your partnership, we were like, man, this is coming up right now, and it has never been discussed. I never heard about it before. I saw something about it, but never really dived in. But yeah, it's coming. So it's so why do you think that this has been so undisputed in the gambling sector, and given that it has a potential regulatory and reputational impact?
Well, I wonder that too. But it's been something that we've been, checking ourselves and testing ourselves on, because we found it strange how quiet it was. So we kept, going back to the drawing board. Are we missing something? Are we not seeing something? Are we over dramatizing something? But actually, the more I look at it, the more it doesn't go away, but actually becomes much clearer that actually, even without this looming deadline, we already have a really strong urgency to do something and improve the really, and I know Rene will be talking about this later, but just the huge gap that exists at the moment still in terms of where are we now to where should we be to actually have accessible websites. And I think, the fact that there is not the explicit mention of gambling may well be a reason, right? So that if you're not directly called out or sort of addressed, you might find it more difficult to realize that you're in scope. So that might well be a factor. And some might take a legal position to say, we don't believe it applies to us, we don't fall under e-commerce. Maybe some national implementations will allow for certain interpretations like that. But irrespective of it, it has a wider implication, and that is specifically on the responsible gambling front. Because the way that some people will be interacting with the website, if terms are not clear, that automatically poses an obvious problem for transparency and fairness from a responsible gambling perspective, which is, the regulation that all the licenses are working under already and has nothing to do with accessibility as such. But the fact that the Accessibility Act is there will draw the spotlight onto it, and it will just have like a magnifying glass on, hang on a minute, did we maybe overlook a quarter of the population? Yes, we did. And so, are they already our customers? If yes, how are we catering to their needs?
Yeah.
It's a bit of a black box, and that also might be part of why we've not heard so much about it, is that maybe sometimes when you do realize there is a problem, the problem gets so big that it becomes a bit daunting. But I mean, we're here to say, let's start working on it so that it doesn't turn into that, because there's really, a lot that can be done.
Yeah, I bet that once the industry hears this podcast, they were like, "Oh my God, we forgot about this. We were so tied up with going to conferences and having parties and networking that we forgot about this." So yeah, it's very interesting to see that like we cover fintech. I researched that they have already implemented these types of measures, especially I think probably even before 2019, because it's a different niche. But what makes accessibility in the gambling industry uniquely challenging compared to other sectors? Because it shouldn't be so hard to do, right?
Well, I think the nature of the services themselves are quite challenging, because it's quick, it's fast, it's blinking, it's shrill, it works with visual effects. It's part of the game, so it doesn't maybe immediately make you think of, will a blind person enjoy this, or how could a blind person enjoy this? Like that might not be the first thought or the first user that people would have in mind when also designing the product and designing the whole website and the experience around it. And sort of gambling, part of the thrill, of course, also lives from that urgency and from that rapid pace, depending on the vertical, of course. But let's take sports betting, much slower pace, like unless it's in betting, right? So if there isn't that urgency to place the bet, certain bets would just be possible to do whenever with as much time as you want to. There wouldn't be that time pressure. Then other things, there would be a certain time pressure, or kind of the inbuilt expectation that, say, a slot machine or a slot game would just make more fun, and it would be more fun if there is a frequent spin and a lot of things are happening. But that might be something that just needs to be redefined to an extent, and also looked at to understand the user want and specifically of that user group. And accessibility doesn't mean to make everything the same and sort of push it all into a box. It's about making it work and being very practical. And that's what I like about it as well, about this whole topic. It's very, very practical and solutions driven. Like it's about really solving a problem and making it work for a certain group and a very diverse group at that. Like a disability obviously isn't one and the same. So there's many different right ways of doing things, as long as something is being done. I think the other challenge is that the gambling industry in particular works with so many partners. Like an operator will work with various content providers, and that they all sort of need to be on board for that to work, because an operator themselves can't fully control the product offering. So that I think is another challenge, and different maybe to other industries where the control is more on one party and less so dependent on sort of suppliers providing accessible content, for example. And I think we then have a challenge that, unlike other industries, we have both the mandate to include and the mandate to protect from a responsible gaming perspective, like where we have to actually exclude people if we're too worried about their gambling behavior. And there's sort of a bit of a friction or inbuilt contradiction between sort of making everything accessible and at the same time, well, not making everything accessible, or protecting the vulnerable. So that needs to go hand in hand. It isn't a contradiction if we think about just the principle and idea of gambling regulation in general, which just says any adult needs help from the government sort of, and from licensing and from regulation, and therefore, will be decided for if they are in a vulnerable state. So that will apply in an equal way, but adapted to sort of the disabled community that will be reached through the accessibility tools.
All right. So for those who are just listening to the podcast and not seeing the podcast, Rene is very, very excited to share something as well. So Rene, I would also like to ask you about how did this partnership come together? Because I don't think that you were focusing on the gambling industry before, right?
Yeah, so CityMaaS actually has a big presence in retail, travel, hotel sector, um, generally on the retail in the different segments, market size. And actually, gambling industry came to find me. I think that's a story that Jessica will be able to tell you. Actually, Jessica got in touch with us, and we were very excited about it. And then we started to have really deep conversation in terms of how gambling industry actually fits into terms of the regulations, the European Accessibility Act 2025. It needs to be compliant on 28th of June, which is fairly soon.
It's tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow, yesterday. It should be
Yeah.
like, last decades. But yeah, so the partnership was actually flourishing in a way that's the more we talk about it. Obviously, the initial conversation is that, is the gambling industry is part of this regulation, and how is that intertwined with the licensing processes in terms of responsible gambling? Then we start to dive into a bit more detail in terms of what if this happened, certain text needs to be prominent in certain things. What about from the accessibility perspective? Does it work? So the more we talked about it, the more we think that, as Jessica mentions, that gambling industries is part of the e-commerce industries. It should be compliant, but also from a responsible gambling perspective. That is a huge point when everybody is neurodiverse. Everybody understands the same text differently. So, in order to make sure that potentially there are neurodiverse customers on gambling websites, gaming websites that are actually playing games or placing bets, they're not perhaps consuming the responsible gambling procedures or policies correctly or able to access, that's a huge point, right? That will be a breach of licensing for operators. So, just the little things like that the more we talk about, the more we can see how, as a partnership, that we can help the gambling industries to strive to continue provide that entertainment for individuals that find the thrills from the gambling and gaming industry, but also in a responsible way, right, as part of the regulation. But I let Jessica tell you about how she found us and how this is going.
How did you find them?
So I found them, well, once after a conversation with a friend who's a teacher for kids with disabilities, and he mentioned some, this European Accessibility Act, and said, "Oh, that must be really relevant for you guys as well." Never heard of it, and so from there I thought this can't be. So I then started researching, and then quickly noticed, that's great. I can start thinking about it, and we can have talks. And Cecil and me, my business partner, we can come up with all sorts of plans and know how to integrate it with the regulations. But we're missing like the actual, software, the actual tool, the actual thing that will make a difference and will also help extract the data that we need. And that's where we need a partner. So then I started searching, and I mean, Rene is used to being found. They were found by the BBC and invited to join Dragon's Den. So I found them too. And, it was just great to have then a partner who has so many accolades with them. Right? So some of the London Mayor Office works with them. Then they have 3 patents for the softwares and for everything that they've developed. They're publicly funded. They are also privately funded, including from Microsoft, and just some big names, some good accolades behind it. Heavily invested in research, having really done the homework to understand the community that they're seeking to serve and find solutions for. So yeah, for us it was a no-brainer to reach out, and as Rene says, it's been really fruitful sort of to dive into the discussions, and then also with our clients and the interest that we've been getting, right? Sort of it just drives the whole matter forward and expands our thoughts about it, but also lets us focus onto how can we actually solve the problem, because it's easy to then go on a complete treasure hunt of problems, and we'll find loads, but you can get lost in the way. And I feel sort of through our conversation we've really managed to come down with a roadmap and a plan for how we can actually use this. And it's great to see the interest from some, and including some of the trade associations have approached us, and we're in talks with some law firms who are seeking our help. So we're seeing some traction building, and that's really, really promising for this topic.
All right. So most probably, let's talk about risks as well, because probably some operator out there is listening to this with his coffee and like, phew, man, what are the risks here? Are we going to lose our license, or what are the fines? So what's at stake here for gambling operators that fail to make their platform accessible? And also, of course, after 28th of June, is there still some time maybe left or to implement some measures, or is it like a hard stop there and the next day they are already giving out fines, or are there any fines? So, Rene,
Yeah,
you
I
can
can
go
add
first.
more from a general perspective. I think European Accessibility Act require all the companies in Europe, all the member states, to be compliant by 28th of June 2025. But also require companies actually doing business in Europe from outside, have European customers and clients, to be compliant with that standards as well. Now, that is, as Jessica mentioned, is a harmonious kind of regulations across different European member states, but a lot of proactive countries like Italy, for example, they actually already embed that into local laws and regulations, and they already started implementing, executing the compliance. France too. So there's a lot of really proactive countries already started making this a local law to be compliant, and have governing bodies and monitoring bodies to make sure that this is compliant. And in terms of fine wines, since this is actually a serious point from to find companies that are not compliant with these standards, which is part of law, local law in the country, right? It's actually more serious than when GDPR came out. Remember the panic of GDPR privacy came out in Europe, like, oh, the fines and all of that. But actually, the fine could be higher than the GDPR, so up to 5% in some of the local countries, up to 5% of the group revenue. So not just the local companies you find locally, but also on a group level, right? 5% of revenue, that's huge on a group level. So there is, maybe there were some swift timelines locally in different countries, across different sectors, but I think, from a risk management perspective, whether you're operator, whether you're in the ecosystem, what other stakeholders you are in the ecosystem, it's always good to plan it before it hits you, before you say, okay, I fancy suing you, one of you guys, just to see how it goes. Because look, I have the foundation, I have the laws on my side, and I find it is not accessible. And by the way, we use our tech to scan over 1 million web page against the WCAG standard, which is international standard for accessibility. We find 95%, 98% of the websites are not compliant. So there's a huge amount of work to make sure that all the digital infrastructure, if you like, across different sectors and gaming sectors to be compliant with that standard.
All right, Jessica,
Well,
anything to
yeah,
add?
actually, on the lawsuits, we only need to look to the US because the US has had, their version of the European Accessibility Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, for a few years now, and there we continue to see a rising trend in the web accessibility lawsuits that are being brought. So I picked out a number actually in 2023, there were over 4,600 such lawsuits, and that was over 42% increase from the previous year. What's also really noticeable is that there's, it's very concerted action. So will be a small group of filers or sort of people or organizations bringing claims on behalf of others. So it's really also being used as, a money maker, essentially.
Yeah,
so like the cease and desist orders that we've seen in other industries as well, that is something, and because it's fairly easy to do, to scan a website, notice, okay, they're not compliant with this, let's sue them. It's a very straightforward process, and a lot of these cases, and that's why we're not seeing a lot documented, but there were a few in the news. Churchill Downs, for example, DraftKings had a run in it, FanDuel the same, but most cases are settled out of court, also because of the huge reputational impact that collecting those kind of lawsuits could have. And the risks on the implementations that we're seeing in the national laws that implement the European Accessibility Act, there's a lot of sort of laws that also say, we will name and shame you. Like, we will put you on the list on the naughty list of only operators, and it's not specific to gambling, right? It's a different regulator that will be looking after that. But then that's purely from the accessibility side. And then we move on to what is probably closer to heart of most gambling operators at the moment, is the gambling regulators.
Yeah.
We will work together with the accessibility regulators, but we'll look at it from a slightly different perspective, because they will be looking at it from the responsible gambling lens and from the fairness transparency lens. So that's really where we see the biggest potential for risk from gambling regulatory side of things, where we can see the fines that we have been seeing for responsible gambling violations and shortcomings, or AML violations and shortcomings, and accessibility has an impact on both. And I thought, actually, to maybe illustrate the problem a bit, Rene was so kind to prepare sort of a simulation of a website, and we picked the MGA's website, although disclaimer, they have an accessible website, so we can't fault them, but we didn't want to use any operator's website here, so we hope they'll forgive us for using them as an example. But it's just to illustrate how a website can look for a person with dyslexia or just some challenges there. So I hope you can see this now on the screen.
Yeah.
See how the letters keep jumping around. It's very difficult to actually understand the text because it sort of keeps changing in front of our eyes. And if we imagine this is now, any kind of pop-up that is supposed to warn me about something, or seeks me to confirm, yes, I have read and understood this, or just simply the terms and conditions during the registration process. If that's how I'm experiencing the website, then I think it's not a big stretch to see a regulator saying, well, we can't really have that. We can't risk that. This is what people will be seeing. And also from there, of course, I've been misinformed and I gambled over my means, sort of lawsuits that would be based on that are very easy to see coming.
All right. Okay. So for those who are listening, make sure to just go to the Hipther TV YouTube channel and check out the screenshot that was now presented by Jessica. So let's stick to the regulators. How prepared do you think the EU gambling regulators really are to enforce this? And have any of them issued any specific guidelines or indicated how they will monitor compliance?
We're not aware of them having published any guidelines on how to monitor, but we're very aware from all the conversations that we've had that they are definitely looking into it or have been pulled in from the accessibility regulators to have conversations. So this has started. Within the member states, the relevant regulators are starting to talk to each other. And the gambling regulators are ready, right? They have been ready. Like there, it's only a matter of, do we see this as a responsible gambling problem or not? And nothing changes basically in their process or how they would enforce. They would be ready to go, and we're aware from the conversations that they see this as a concern, and are looking into this. There is willingness so far from what we gather to speak to industry and also get the concerns or also thoughts or also, of course, solutions and maybe also limitations, right? Sort of which can then be also taken back to the accessibility regulator to form those discussions. So it will be interesting how those conversations shape. But yes, definitely regulators gearing up, I would say, and it would be more a question of how the regulators share the work as opposed to will it even become relevant. I think that's one for us is a yes from the conversation from the regulators, like it's been confirmed to us essentially, yes, it will become relevant.
All right, so we do like spreading the news about partnerships every time. I'm curious about what this partnership offers to your clients. Rene, what did the partnership with EGARA help you to have more to offer to your clients?
Yeah, so from a gambling perspective, well, from a CityMaaS perspective, we're offering solutions such as auditing the websites to ensure that the coding behind the websites are compliant with WCAG. And that is conformed by the local laws and regulations across Europe. So all the European member states that will require websites to be compliant with that standard, potentially including gaming, as we mentioned, if they're part of the e-commerce, that is a definite yes. And we all our auditors, just like the accountants, need to be qualified to be auditing the financial statements of any companies. Our auditors are also IAP qualified, so they have their qualifications, continuous professional developments to make sure that the audit outcomes are high quality and up to standard. We audit the codes behind the websites and the mobile applications. If you have a app for the gaming, we also audit the apps as well against 4 principles of WCAG, and then many different successful criteria, over hundreds. Our auditors actually use their own assistive technology. All of our auditors are disabled themselves, so they are either vision impaired or either they have neurodiverse conditions as well. So when they're auditing the websites, they also use assistive technology to go through the website line by line, each code against that standard, and they will create a finding in terms of this piece of code is not compliant with which guideline, which part of the guideline is WCAG 2.5, 2.6, stipulate it has to be this size, or stipulates its magnifying has to be visible by this parameters, etc. They will copy that code and they will say, help the software engineer saying, this piece of code needs to be changed to this in order to comply with this. So very, very hands-on kind of experience, if you like, for software engineers that do not have a concept of accessibility when they come to do their coding. And that's what we provide in terms of actually suggest for all our clients to ensure that the housekeeping, the foundations of the websites are accessible for everybody, while disabled community using assistive technology to access the website, they can actually access because the foundation is built correctly. and that's one thing. The other things we offer is a personalized digital experiences with our tools that Jessica mentioned before, which is a improved accessibility tool with personalizations, where I can actually demo now.
All right.
So let me see if I can share. So I don't know if you see my screen.
Yes, now we can.
Excellent. So this is actually a public sector website. So we obviously have our Sesame tool in the perfume shop, for example, or Bumik Hotel, various different websites. But essentially, it's a website tool that giving each individual a personalized digital experience. For example, if you're vision impaired, you can just click on this button here, and it automatically highlights the contrast, ensure people with slightly mild visual impairments can actually consume the information. And if you have dyslexia, you can make sure that it's a readable font in case your websites is using a funky font that may be in line with your brand guidelines, but actually it's not accessible for people with dyslexias or people neurodiverse. They don't really know how to navigate. You can change you can turn on the emphasize links so that they know how to navigate. That you can change the font size as well for the elderlies and the aging population. They can't really interact very well to ensure that it's readable. Word and letter spacing. So Jessica just showed demonstrating a letter line jumpings when it comes to people with dyslexia. You can utilize this tool to actually ensure that you can understand the text, what it means. If there's a different spacing between words or lines or even the letter themselves. So you have font adjustment, you have style adjustments as well, you have high contrast, you have various different, if people have color blindness, for example, you can change the color of the text
colors.
Yeah, so that they can actually read it properly, or you can even custom different, as a funky color that you like. Is a bit of a fun element there. So it's personalizing your digital experience within that. You can read out loud the text as well, for people using screen readers, reading guides, or helping people actually be able to focus. People with autisms, they can stop the animations on the website. There's no animations on this website, but they can make sure that there's not sensory overload contents that is jumping up to them, for example. So so this is our tool, and it's in different local language. Depends on the browsers, whether you're from Romania or you're from Germany, etc. Will be in your local language. People can actually use it. And that is our tech. Now, the important parts of this actually is the data behind it.
Latest incidents: fire at derelict building.
Read out loud.
Yeah. So that I need to stop that so that we don't interrupt our. Okay. So. So the powerful things about this tool is the data behind it in relation to gambling industries, where we obviously, if it's implemented in the gaming websites, that users actually use certain functionalities to interact with the game. For example, let's say the readable font, people with dyslexia and work in lesser spacing, then potentially the data behind it could tell a story that individual actually maybe it's a vulnerable group that requires certain amount of additional monitoring and help. For example, the responsible gambling page needs to be consumable, it needs to be accessible for that particular individual, right? So I think as part of the licensing, the more I interact with Jessica, the more I learn from, you know, the authority within the gaming industry, the more I just think that accessibility is a must from a responsible gambling perspective. So that is the tool and the data itself. But on top of that, the business case is that the tool can help the operators on their website to improve the user experience and user journey, which is the important parts, right? You want your customers and websites continuously interact in a responsible way, of course, but in a highly personalized and effective way, so that you have the, you know, the higher pleasure out of the entertainment that you're engaging with the gambling industry. So that is that. I want to also take opportunity, if I may, to share a report that we could do for operators, for example, completely for free. If anybody is interested in finding out whether their websites are, you know, where can be improved to help improve the accessibility side of things. This report can tell you what kind of disabilities on your websites it's impacted. For example, this particular website is showing that the non-compliance with WCAG on their website is impacting 37% blind people, 37% deaf-blind, 24% mobility, and deaf 0.4%. A majority of it is serious, 72%. What that means is that users does not have very good user experience when they go on the gaming platform. They can go on it, but they can't really interact very well, so they will just leave. Critical means they can't even access very well. And we even go into more detail in terms of why it's not compliance against that standard WCAG. For example, the anchor element is missing a description, which means that people with assistive technology can't really navigate and understand from one anchor element, i.e. a header from the subheader, yep, or, you know, the structure of the website itself. Image elements missing old attributes, which is quite a common one, actually. If you want to have the same experience from as a vision impaired person as people without a vision impaired person, without an old text on the image, you won't know what the website is telling you, what is enabling you to feel, or maybe it's something that get you excited, particularly in a gambling website, right? Etc. For input elements, labels not visible here. For example, if you have a form, you need the users to fill in the form, fill in the details, for example, in order to sign up an account. But the box on the website, it's not coded saying that this box is for your name, not for your email, for example, right? You need to code it in a way in the code itself that comply with WCAG in order for the assistive technologies to saying, okay, they understand this box is for my name, not for email. Now, etc. So these are the technologies that we have to help the gambling industries to be more accessible and compliance, most importantly, I think. And on top of that is to enable that user experience to be personalized to the individuals, and hence high engagement, high conversion, etc.
All right. And this is even from a search engine optimization point of view, really good to have, because it shows all the elements that might help you rank better.
Yes.
So,
yes.
yeah, Jessica, what do you make of this partnership?
Well, I think it is great. And it's, I love how it came about as well. Sort of that it's, you know, in a kind of stumbled into it, and then with an urgency and a deadline. I like that. That sort of pushes me to act quickly. So for me personally, that was a good combination. And, you know, I feel we're learning a lot from each other. And in our sessions sort of that we use to prepare sort of our products, or have been using to put together our services, you know, that's been really a fun process and very beneficial at that.
All
Yeah.
right. So now,
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that, you know, our offering makes sense to be complementary to each other. for the gaming industry. Jessica's authorities in gaming industry in terms of helping and whether it's big or small organizations to compliance, getting licensings, or getting out of litigations or lobbying, etc. So I think accessibility comes to play in terms of compliance, but when you look into a bit more details on the things that needs to be compliant, and then some part of it actually touches as licensing regulations as well. For example, the responsible gambling messaging needs to be certain plays in certain text sizes, etc., which touches kind of touch point with accessibility side of things. So it's very important to be making sure that obviously licensing is valid and it's compliance with the gambling industry itself. But when it comes to the make sure that the responsible gambling is accessible but also compliant at the same time. That's why we find our offerings very hand in hand to make sure that our clients in the gaming industries are compliant with accessibility guidelines, but also compliance with the necessary licensing and responsible gambling regulations.
And we have the upper hand at the moment still, right? So we've talked about the lack of there being existing guidance and all of that. I feel we're making it.
Yeah.
With our partnership and with our clients together, we're shaping sort of what we think is a suitable solution and a suitable translation of the accessibility requirements to then the gambling regulatory requirements. How does that go together? And as much as we've found our way together, that's, I think, what we're doing for our clients just in the same way.
All right. So now that we've seen that the Assist.Me tool, how it looks and how it works, Rene, could you tell me what are some of the most common digital accessibility failures you're seeing on the gambling platforms after analyzing them, and especially those that could impact core features like deposits, withdrawals, or self-exclusion tools?
Yeah. I mean, some of them is already mentioned in some of the examples I show is that, for example, the input element is not coded by standard. Yeah, if the individual who's trying to deposit something, but they don't know where to put that deposit, as in how much money they want to put.
Yeah, some of them have some forms up there that they want to look very cool, like the design and user experience, but you cannot even find the space. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the common ones. Other common ones are the people with dyslexia, which will demonstrate it very clearly in terms of jumping letters and words. From a responsible gambling perspective, if people can't really understand how they can exclude themselves or how they can get help when to get to in the journey that's in the gambling industries where they require assistance by law, then there's a breach, right? Of that. So yeah, and old text, old attributes, navigations, kind of complexities. It's also another key things for gambling industries. I think if your game, it's obviously game has many rules, and you need to tell the users how to play. But if it's not coded accessibly, the users don't even know the rule. Where's the fairness? That's another implications in terms of licensing itself. So yeah, those are the key ones I've seen. There are many. It depends on the individual's company's websites. There are many other findings we find. Actually, majority. Well, I don't find them. So they do need help around that.
Yeah, and I think we don't even have to mention the free deposits, the free spins, the deposit bonuses, which are crazy in terms of explaining how they actually work.
Oh, really? Okay, there you go.
Yeah. That's the interesting part of it. So Jessica, because I mentioned the ESG, would it be fair to say that the accessibility plays an important part of responsible leadership and ESG. And do you think that maybe do you see accessibility becoming a differentiator in B2B and even in mergers and acquisition decisions across the industry?
Yeah, I think we're actually already seeing that. And we just the other day, the Malta Gaming Authority published their first insights report into their voluntary ESG initiative, where some operators contributed some data and reporting. So it's like a voluntary reporting, and they extracted the information and anonymized it, and then published a report on the findings. Overall, I mean, super positive that operators participated. And even though it's clear there's room for growth in terms of the quality of the data used and sort of the robustness of things, but what the MGA also told us in this first report findings is that inclusion is very much looked at on the basis of male-female representation in boards. That sort of inclusion, diversity, but we're not thinking disabled so much.
Yeah.
And especially we're not thinking like, maybe if we are thinking disabled, we're thinking within our employment and employee base, but we're not thinking customer. So we're missing out a huge part. We're not thinking customer, we're not thinking product. And the MGA didn't say do that expressly in their findings, but they said look beyond what you're looking at now, which we interpret as saying, look at customer and product, which would also be hand in hand, one with the conversations and the feedback that we have been getting from the MGA, and also the incoming European Accessibility Act regulation that will just draw the spotlight on it more. So I think certainly because responsible gaming is part of the social, so the S in the ESG pillar, that will just keep being a thing. And we also have the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, and there's 17 of them, and that's what forms the basis and what then the ESG standards are mapped against. And 5 of those directly, specifically reference disability, and but all of them really have disability and accessibility built into it implicitly, because there's sort of the leave no one behind principle that governs them all. So that it's inbuilt into sort of any ESG system already. So as those ESG systems mature, accessibility will feature in that more. And also I think that's where companies really can look at it as an opportunity and an advantage, especially those leading the field in ESG. They should be fully embracing accessibility, in my opinion, because it is a fairly easy win and does go quite a long way. By making the websites compliant, or as compliant as can be, and taking those first steps and really championing this accessibility and doing something for the customers. I mean, it's avoids the risk. It has a business case built in. You're attracting a new group of customers. There's a lot of pros in that. And then, of course, if you're wanting to be an ESG leader, another pro. On the investment side, we can already see, like all of the studies that have come out. Morgan Stanley just a few months ago published its latest one, where they said, yes, 88% of global investors favor sustainable businesses. So the trend is there. And I think even with Trump's skepticism towards diversity, equity, and inclusion, all of that, it hasn't stopped that trend. It's sort of the sustainability stands for, just also safe investment to an extent, and long-term investment. So that's what the stability that it brings. That's what investors are looking for. And any target that is putting itself on the market, trying to be acquired, if it doesn't have to list up the list of lawsuits that are pending for all sorts of things, be that player claims that
Yeah.
we're seeing in Germany, Austria, right, for sort of just the
Yeah.
legal basis, or be it then for accessibility, discrimination, sort of responsible gaming, whatever lawsuits. If you don't have that list or you have a short one, it will always be better, like both for price and for the comfort of the investments that are investing. And if you can then, depending on the investor's plans as well, right? Sort of if you can then show we have a plan on how to tackle accessibility, even if it's not like, even if on the 28th of June you're not ready, right? And very few will be. But sort of if that's the case, at least if there's a plan emerging or in place, and that's a plan that can be pursued, that will also be something to actually be able to put into a presentation of the company when it is being sold. So definitely those things will be a positive for investors, and will be honored in that way. I think on the B2B front and sort of thinking partnerships, etc., it will also gain traction because, again, as the whole ESG landscape sort of evolves, more and more attention will also be given with who are we actually working with, and are those sustainable businesses, and is our entire supply chain and our whole environment, how good is that and how sustainable is that? So it also then interlinks with something I mentioned earlier, where we have as a challenge the many players that have to sort of go together for it to truly work. That will be, a longer term effort for sure. But if you're the company that is championing that or ready to run with a partner that is championing it, that will put companies in a better position.
All right. So, Rene, what does the certification look like in practice? And is it aligned with existing standards, like you mentioned, the WCAG 2.1, 2.2? And is it recognized by regulators or third parties?
Yeah, absolutely. So the certifications we give out is called VPAT certifications. Within the certification, obviously, before the certification, we have to do the work first. So we have all the code, every single line of code in your websites and your mobile applications, whether it's native or not, both iOS and Android, against all the guidelines in WCAG, and then provide that finding. And then we have to help them to remediate and rectify it. And then we have to revalidate their recommendations. So after we revalidate, they've done all the adjustments, and then we checked it again, and it's actually still not compliant. So we can issue that VPAT certificate. But if there is, for whatever reasons, that the companies require a bit more time, or there are some difficulties in terms of conflicts or things like that we could actually highlight that on the VPAT as well, just to know that for all the stakeholders within the company, as Jessica mentioned, if you're actually in the process of selling, etc., then it's good to let the stakeholder knows that you're working on these issues, even though it might not be resolved. The top results is it's done, gone, compliance. But if it's not, it's on the VPAT, and so we'll continue monitoring that, and we'll come back to it, and we continue to provide updates. What's good things about working with us in digital accessibility is that we help clients to continuous compliance, because any gaming websites, any websites actually, is a live evolving thing. It's your business front, it's your shop front. If you have new contents and new guidelines, new policies, new licensing and things like that, you need to be continuous, make sure those contents are compliant. So we help our clients to continue to compliance with that standard, and work with our clients as a partner.
All right. So knowing some of the companies out there, when they apply for the testing, they are already their marketing team is already writing the PR that they are certified and we are awesome, you know. So it of course certification is valuable, but sometimes it turns into PR stunts
Yeah.
just to get the news out there.
No, we don't issue certificate before before done the work. We have to audit.
Yeah, but these guys sometimes already written the PR and are
Yeah,
ready to just like press enter and send it to their partners once they get the certifications. So how do you ensure it's not just a badge that operators use for PR without maintaining compliance on long term? And are there some mechanisms in place to ensure ongoing monitoring of this? And
yes.
another question would be if there's a danger that operators treat these as like the one-time fix rather than the continuous process.
Yeah, that's a very good question because actually it's the same as well in the gaming industries. I would imagine that is quite a common thing to maintain your license, right? To
Yeah.
maintain compliance with your license in order to operate. So from an accessibility perspective, uh, ongoing compliance is a must. When you're complying, you must comply throughout. And what we can help with is what we have our aware technologies to help continues to monitor if there's any new contents. We can give the operator a nudge and say, this is you have new contents, but the new content, that part of new contents is not quite in line with that compliance. So we have technology, but we also offer our services in terms of half yearly check. So we've done all the work, it's done, but it will be an incremental cost. It won't be a whole full audit cost because we've already done all the hard work. And we also offer trainings for companies to have in-house engineers, for example, or even the suppliers that the content suppliers, the game suppliers that the coders themselves. Trainings as well in terms of what it means by, an accessibility concept. How do you code this? What is parameter? What's your size magnifier and up to what size? What's your color contrast and what's the parameter you have to reach? For example, in that kind of fine details, we can train the employees within the company to make sure that they are actually able to monitor themselves as a principle, as a culture, as a way of doing things within the organization. Then our aim is that you guys don't need us anymore. You just carry on, and then we've done a good job, and then we just need to double check on a yearly basis to make sure that you continuously comply, and that is where the certificate will continue to renew.
All right, so there are probably stakeholders out there thinking that, oh my God, another expense. So this is something like another expensive compliance box that we need to tick. And how do you convince stakeholders otherwise? Jessica, you go first on this.
Well, I think, and again, this is something that is becoming more and more obvious to me the more I dive into this or have dived into this topic. Yes, it's something to do. It's something that will extend the to-do list rather than shorten it. But by doing it, you're taking away a lot of headaches.
Yeah.
Like all of these potential lawsuits, I certainly could do without if I was running a legal department. Then the sort of the compliance risk, same thing. It's manageable. It just needs to be cleverly done and integrated with existing policies. So there's no reinventing the wheel. It doesn't need an additional headcount or anything major. It just needs working with the systems and being smart about it. And then working, using tools like Assist Me to then gauge the data that can be used for the behavior monitoring and can be just integrated into what is already happening and working. And by that, slightly expanding on the checks that are being done or the monitoring, but by that saving a lot of potential problems and fines in the future. So from a risk perspective, I think that's definitely sort of a convincing point, I'd say, sort of it takes away headache. But then also it really opens opportunities. We talked about the ESG leadership opportunity. So, moving it away from a compliance issue to actually a leadership opportunity, I think is something that shouldn't be underestimated. Like for years, our industry has been rebranding itself as the entertainment industry, and society is just expecting a bit more, including from gambling operators. And our industry has always had a battle with reputational problems, and it's a way of doing something and ticking many boxes. So I think it's not just one box that needs to be ticked and is the cost for that one box, but actually it ticks a lot of them. And then you're opening up your business in a controlled and safe way. Like now you might have you might have players with disabilities gambling, but they are not being properly informed. So actually are a potential problem and a lawsuit in the making. But if you know what's happening and going on and who is using the tool, and you can link that and can then protect these people accordingly and give them the information in the way that they need it, you're taking away that risk and you're opening up the door. Like very simply, if your shop has a ramp, more people will get to it. It's the same online. Like if the door is open, right, and everybody can go through it, well, more people will go through it. So there's a real commercial business case to it as well. And just the reputation itself, I think, would be my last point.
Yeah.
How about you, Rene?
Just add to that exact same points in different angle. But I think you mentioned SEOs, search engines optimizations. Actually, at the moment, Google is not ranking accessibility as part of the parameters to rank your games in your sites to the search engine. But I predict it will. Because when you actually audit your website and you make it accessible, you code it in a way that's more user-friendly, you code it in a way that is compliant with WCAG, it helps the SEO optimizations to bump up your discoverability and on the website, on the search engines. And in fact, there are already number of business cases that's done, that once you've done your accessibility audit, you code it in a way that it's accessible, it can improve your SEO by 6 to 7%. It's I mean, that's incremental, but then there is it's a business case also includes people can engage properly, right, with your gaming, and we're left alone reading your rules or engage in a personalized way. There's more pleasure out of it from an entertainment perspective, right? If I'm able to get joy from the websites, then that's the ultimate goal. So I think our tool and our offering, our making sure that the foundation is done properly on the website, certainly achieve that from a business case perspective, from a technical stack, search engine optimization perspective.
Yeah, it's a good signal for the EEAT, the experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness signal that Google has implemented in 2024, which is definitely something that you can rank higher by implementing these measures. So a quick question for you both. So if an operator listening today wants to get started, or even listening tomorrow to this recording, or in a month or so, what are the first 3 things they should do? So Rene, you go first.
Well, definitely get in touch with us. As I mentioned, that we can offer free advice just to get you started and have a check on your websites and give you a bit high level advice in terms of what can be improved in terms of your user experience. And of course, from EGARA side of things, review policies, etc. I will let Jessica to explain that. And as I mentioned, that we're actually working on an offering that is hand in hand in terms of licensing as well as compliance WCAG, the accessibility guideline, with the accessibility guideline deadlines coming up. So I'd rather ESG leaders and then those as operators that have a higher level of social awareness will get in touch with us, and then we can help.
All right, Jessica.
Yeah, I think it's sort of understand the gaps that are there, right? Sort of, and that's where we can literally run a check, and then you'll know the biggest gaps, right? So that's the first thing. It's easy to do and free. So that's I think a good.
That's very important.
Exactly. I like free things too. So for sure. No, and it just gives the starting point, right? Sort of it allows to make a plan, be that internally, with our help, without our help. Like there's many ways of working with us or with others, right? It's just about tackling it, and that can be, I think, would be our suggestion for the best starting off point. Understand where the gaps are, and make a plan how to fix them, and we can then work on sort of the what we talked about earlier, sort of the smart integration into how can we do this with, effectively, and in a way that it doesn't put everything to a halt and 5 teams need to work on this for the next months. Like, how can we do this in a more, it works with the other thousands of objectives and deadlines that are already in place, and it won't sort of break the bank or break sort of the capacity of the teams that are there. So and that's where we have the experience from both the development side and sort of the how to actually then build in these things and adapt policies and processes from our regulatory compliance side experience, where we can just help and take on some of that responsibility in delivering this in a way that works for the business, and then the marketing teams can write about it.
All right. So yeah, even though if you are listening to this podcast in September this year and you're just now finding out that you missed this deadline, you can still do it. It's a quick process, and it's something that you can avoid, like we did with the GDPR implementation. We started implementing things about a week before the deadline. Yeah, for us it was much more difficult because our websites were hosted on a server in New York, so we needed to move to Europe. But we did a smart thing and we eliminated any cookie that was set. So basically, just kept the strict part, so we don't get in trouble afterwards. And we kept it like that since 2019, 2018. Sorry, a long time ago. We did not look into monitoring anything about it, but we know that we are good. So, of course,
And
there's
also
also gambling.
Sorry if I jump in, but that's a perfect example, the GDPR experience, right? It started as
Yeah.
a super niche thing, and it was mainly driven by the shock horror fines that were there, right? And that were threatening and looming. We
Yeah.
have a similar situation here, right? Even worse, as Rene said. So some member states even apply higher fines than that as a threat. But apart from even that sort of scaring everybody, but I think we'll have a similar trend, sort of going from niche to just a part of every company has it. Like, it's normal to have a DPO, to have a privacy policy on the website, to have a cookie policy, all of that. It's just standard practice. It's like having terms and conditions. It's just part of the game, right? And that's what's going to happen with accessibility, where we can already see the starting points of that. But it's the perfect sort of comparison and example that you just mentioned.
Yeah, but from the perspective of somebody running 18 websites and conferences and everything, this actually makes sense, because GDPR was like, okay, the user will just click accept it all and goodbye. But this is actually influencing people. This is something else. So yeah. So of course, there might be some gambling regulators listening to our podcast. We know that they do, but they don't like to admit it. So, what's your message to these guys who are listening and who haven't yet prioritized accessibility as a supervisory focus? So, Jessica, what's your message to them?
Well, I would say seek the conversation, right? Engage with the industry, have those talks, and understand where the licensees are at the moment, so that those who are making efforts can also report about their successes in that, and also the struggles that they've had, so that there can be a reasonable expectation that can be formed around what can be achieved when, and also what what a baseline could look like. And I think approaches that we've seen similar to the ESG context, and I'll use Malta again as an example just because this report was so recent, but it's those kind of approaches that really engage the discussion and the conversation and learning through the dialogue with industry that I think can be really, really useful and beneficial here. We are also going to be involved in some of these discussions because we've confirmed those with the regulators already. So that will be on behalf of clients, but also on behalf of ourselves to give our insights back, and of course also what Rene and CityMaaS can bring sort of from knowing and having researched the needs of the disabled community in so much depth. So this knowledge will also be able to bring forward, and I think keeping that dialogue and then shaping a plan and an guidelines with the industry together, that would be my recommendation and wish towards regulators.
I will add
All
one
right.
more from a regulator perspective. It would be good to have the whole ecosystem maybe also involve the disabled communities themselves, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if they're already involved in the gaming industry, how can they help to improve safer gambling and fairer gambling gaming industry from their perspective? And I think it's very important to include that community as part of the shaping of the policies or guidelines for the industries to follow.
All right. So, yeah, not to end this episode in a bad note, but in some particular countries, here actually where I live, there have been many cases, and there's an alarming amount of cases where disability licenses have been granted for people not having any disability, just for the sake of getting some money out of the government, and of course benefiting of the parking spaces. So this is something that might clear up that part as well, because as Jessica mentioned, there might be some lawsuits sometime, but these guys might want to take advantage of having that license just to make harm. So yeah, we're not living in a perfect world. So yeah, this
Not
is
yet,
something
Zoltan.
that I just wanted to say out loud, because we've seen this a lot, and it's alarming. I don't know if all the countries have it, but this particular country has it. So this is a great way to give you to pass you the closing remarks part. So if you have some parting words, Rene, you can go first, and then Jessica.
I would say thank you for listening, and it is a very important topic to ourselves, but also for every sector. Gaming industries is a industries that as Jessica mentioned, it is coming and it's coming to stay as the trend, and its many benefits of being compliant from a legal perspective, from a business case perspective. But don't be afraid. We're here to help because it's a new topic and it's completely concept. It could be quite complex. In fact, it's very complex. It's a bit like UN SDG goes. But we're here to help. So if you need some help, come to us. We can get our conversation started.
All right, Jessica.
Yeah, well, my thanks goes to you, Zoltan, for having us. Again, this was great. And yes, thanks, of course, to everybody who was listening. And yeah.
All right.
Look forward to
Thank you
what's
so
to come.
much. everyone again for tuning in, watching, or listening to our podcast. I would like to thank my guests for taking their time and hope that they will not be drinking from a fire hose coming this 3 weeks or 4 weeks before the deadline comes. So, thank you, everyone. Take good care, and we will be back next week with more important stuff. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
And that's a wrap for this section of Hipther Talks. Thank you for being a part of our journey today. Don't forget to tune in next week for more insights and discussions. Stay connected with us on Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and more. Until then, keep exploring and keep growing. We'll see you next time.